Bitch, I burn sage. You call me Luke Cage. Turn up like a page. Hit the stage. I just won't get paid. I'm gon' make a name. Want the fame. I'm gon' stack my change. Touch it, you get changed. You a stain. Wipe you, you a stain. When Dex my Nina name. Bitch, I burn sage. You call me Luke Cage. Turn up like a page. Hit the stage. I just won't get paid. I'm gon' make a name. Want the fame. I'm gon' stack my change. Touch it, you get changed. You a stain. Wipe you, you a stain. When Dex my Nina name.
Flushed down that toilet, boy.
I ain't tripping.
Nah, it was a good fight though, bro. It was definitely a good fight.
I think Kamaru Usman's on steroids.
Maybe. I don't know. I don't think he is.
I think there's a lot of fighters in the UFC that are on steroid cycles that do it the right way, take the right breaks at the right times. To they'll go like off the roster, maybe not off the roster,
and I'll listen to you because I'm just getting into fighting.
I mean, we're all just sitting here talking shit. I don't 100% know if the dude's on steroids, but there's ways to get around it. I mean, after a fight, sometimes they get medical suspensions, and obviously after a brutal fight, they're not fighting again for probably another year.
Yeah.
So they get out of the USADA test pool for certain times within their careers, and it seems like they can start their cycles then and then end them when they. I mean, I don't know. I'm not a fucking expert, but I mean, one thing Colby did say was he has injection marks on his stomach. He's got the acne on his back. Like the acne thing is a sign of like a hormonal imbalance. And then obviously injection marks, which I mean, who knows what their injection marks? It might just be acne, but hey, who knows with Colby? He's just talking shit. But I mean, you never know. I mean, it's like baseball in the 90s. Like everybody that was hitting home runs in the 90s was on fucking steroids.
But I just, from what, and maybe this doesn't contradict what you're saying. Like, I'm just saying, like, from what I've heard other, like the commentators say, what I've heard other people say, even what I've heard you say is that Kamaru has always been a solid fighter. So it's not surprising to me. And going back and watching his older fights, it like, you see like the evolution of his fighting style.
Sure.
And
you also see the evolution of his endurance, which is why people claim he's on EPOs. Is because that's one thing.
What's EPOs?
Performance enhancing SPDs, EPOs. I don't know the exact like acronym or whatever for EPOs. So.
Okay.
But yeah, I was watching this video last night. This dude who's like a professional like fitness trainer, bodybuilder. He breaks down like a lot of these fighters, their bodies, and gives his honest opinion if he thinks they're on a steroid cycle or not. And the one thing he said was, if you look at his endurance in his first couple fights within the UFC, he got gassed quick. Like he wasn't like how he is now. And look, I mean, that could just be proper training, proper breathing techniques. You know, the natural holistic approach of like improving endurance. But I mean, I don't know. The only person that knows is Kamaru and whoever's giving him steroids, if that's the case. But
regardless of all that, which is an interesting conversation, like I said, that would be an interesting conversation to have.
It's a great fight. The
fight was fucking amazing. Yeah. That whole card was fucking amazing.
Yeah, it was. Chandler and fucking Gaethje was a fucking banger.
I missed that one. Is that the one?
That was the first one. The first one on the main card. It was the one before Rose and Wang Li.
What was it? Was one? I think that was the fight. I think her name's like Zhao Weili or something like that. Yeah, what's the one? I think that was the fight you're talking about, because there was one fight they were literally like, "Yo, this fight would be a good fight any other night," but the one prior to this was just so fucking amazing. I missed that one.
They see what they did, because one of the girls, the Rose girl, Kamaru Usman, and Justin Gaethje all have the same coach.
She's a fucking trooper too, by the way.
Trevor Whitman is the coach, and he coaches them all. So I think they wanted to space. It was supposed to go. The last three fights was supposed to be Gaethje Chandler, Rose versus Wang or whatever fuck her name is, and then obviously the final one, Kamaru Colby. So they had to put Michael Chandler, Gaethje first, like, and then have two. It was Cheeto Vera versus Frankie Edgar, and
so I did. That was I missed the first fight then.
Those fights are like, I mean, the first couple fights on the main card sometimes are going to be a little boring or iffy. And Chandler and Gaethje, that fight wasn't supposed to be the first fight, but they had to move it around because the coach, like, he couldn't be in the corner of one fight while trying to backstage get his other fighter prepped, so they wanted to space it out. That's what it sounded like.
Yeah, and that's kind of like what I was thinking, like, because like of all the fights that was on that night, like we had the UFC, but I was extremely interested in the Canelo fight too, because Canelo's like he's one of the favorite, well, not favorite, but like the fighters I like to watch. He's a very exciting fighter. So, and honestly, I'm glad I went with the UFC because that fight was good. Like when I watched the highlights, like the fight was good and everything, but the UFC fights were just next level, bro.
I think that's kind of like that's the tone of things right now. Is like UFC is slowly kind of creeping up and taking over. It's getting more mainstream. I mean, it's just becoming a bigger sport slowly and surely. I mean, it's going to take a while to actually steamroll boxing, and who knows if that'll ever happen. But just on a general spectrum, there's way more casuals that like the UFC, that like MMA. And I'm just going to say the UFC, not MMA, because people aren't watching Bellator.
Yeah,
they're not watching One Fighting Championship or whatever the fuck that league is. It's really the UFC. But all the casual fans gravitate towards that. The people who watch boxing every match, the people that paid for that Canelo fight or went out and watched it, like these people are like boxing, like purists, like maybe not purists, but they're enthusiasts. Like they're not a casual. You have like to like boxing nowadays. I would say you have to be more in a casual. And then the UFC, MMA, it's just like different. Like anybody can, if you have any amount of testosterone in your fucking body, you can appreciate two guys getting in there with fucking 4-ounce gloves and beating the shit out of each other.
Yeah, like Jimmy Dore on YouTube, he be talking about that shit all the time. Like Joe Rogan announces men fighting in cages. But just on like, see, what always fascinated me, like that's how I used to look at the UFC. I used to look at the UFC as like, oh, it's just two guys hopping in a cage, fucking each other up. But it's actual, like, it's a chess game. People, I really feel like people don't realize that shit. Like the intricate, it's just like boxing, but except you got to watch for feet too. Like, and then when you get into the ground game, like it's all chess moves.
Some would argue that boxing is more like what's the not chess, the other fucking game,
Checkers.
Yeah, but boxing is more like checkers
Really?
opposed to MMA because you got more weapons in MMA. That's more pieces on the board with different intricacies to how those styles and like the wrestling game, the ground game, the feet, the hands, like all that shit is just it's a way more broad sport.
Okay.
But I mean, no disrespect to boxing.
Oh yeah, I mean, like
yeah.
Boxing. See, with boxing, like boxing was always something that fascinated me because like it's something niggas could like but UFC, you could do UFC just like fighting and shit too. But like I feel like boxing had the what's the word I'm looking for? It had the advantage of coming first, basically.
Right.
Like,
right. Exactly.
It's kind of, but it's
like
weird.
Grandfather then.
Yeah, but that fight. But let's go back into the fight though. So I want to talk about the what is her name? The Rose fight.
Rose Namajunas.
That was a fucking amazing fight, bro.
It was a good fight.
Like you could tell like Rose really gassed her out. That's literally what she did. She gassed her out because you saw she was doing all that movement because she wasn't trying to get knocked the fuck out again in the first round. She did last time. She was doing all that movement, but it seemed like she was over antsy. Weili. It seemed like she was over antsy because I feel like she could have won that fight. But she was like, and I feel like in her mind, she was psyching herself out like, I'm not trying to get knocked out again, this, that, and the third.
It could be some type of complex from that.
But Rose is she is a solid fighter. Like I said,
I'm telling you, man, it's Trevor Whitman. He's the coach for Rose. Her striking is like probably the best, at least in her division, in the women's division. And then Kamaru Usman, when he got with Trevor Whitman, before that,
they got the same coach?
He was a wrestler first. Like he was not the biggest striker in the world.
Usman's power got up there too.
Right. Also, another argument for the EPL shit and the PEDs. But as far as his form and like, working his jab more and that straight right that knocked fucking Jorge Masvidal the fuck out. That's all. Like that's practice. That's time. That's being with a coach that knows their shit. And like as soon as he got with Trevor Whitman, like. That's when his striking improved like a motherfucker. It wasn't just like a wrestling match with some striking mixed in. Like, it's the funny thing about like, two wrestlers, like Kobe's a wrestler first, but in recent times has had to work his striking in with his fucking MAGA character just to stay afloat in the UFC, just to get fights. And
I love the character though. I love it.
I mean, love it or hate it. It's like the Kardashian effect. He's got like all eyes are good eyes. Like even if you want to see him get knocked the fuck out, you're
like,
still tuning in.
I feel like Kobe. I had an idea for Kobe to do a Old Spice commercial I think it should be him and an American flag boxers in the middle of a desert with an American flag back there. Kind of like the Kanye Touch the Sky video a little bit. I had that shit playing. Let Kanye produce the song for you, dog. That shit would be lit, bro.
I'm not watching it. It's terrible. Horrible idea.
But I fuck with the character. It reminds me of Connor because I feel like we've been kind of missing a void with Connor not being active.
Sure.
Like he usually is. So
I think it's like Connor without any of Connor's personality. Like Kobe is really a mild-mannered, soft-spoken type of guy, and anybody that sees him behind the scenes they'll say the same thing. He's very mild-mannered. He's respectful. He's not, he's trying to be like the WWE heel, and like he doesn't do the best job at it. I don't think it's natural for him. Like, it's natural for Connor to be like an egotistical, shit-talking motherfucker. Yeah. And that's why it just don't come off as natural for Kobe, but he has to do what he's got to do. I mean, it worked out for him. Like, he stayed in the UFC when they were about to cut him because he was in Brazil, beat Damian Maia, and called Brazil a bunch of filthy animals, which is like, obviously, everybody, if you know anything about the UFC, you know anything about Kobe, everybody knows that story. But it kept him afloat. And
if you know anything about Brazil, especially during that time period, their president right now is Jair Bolsonaro. He's basically like the Brazilian version of Trump, and he's a huge like Trump guy. He loves Trump, so it's kind of weird that he would say that because like, but
yeah.
But
yeah, and the biggest takeaway from that fight, or the biggest like, oh shit moment, I don't even think it was the fight. It was afterwards when the first thing Colby did was after the fight was over, shot over to Usman and gave him like some words. I mean, people were like speculating on what he actually said. It sounded like, it's nothing personal to shit talking. And like, I don't think anybody expected that from Colby at all. Like, they never expected him to break character or even just his natural self to be somebody that would show that respect. And he did. I think that was the biggest takeaway. It was like, damn, like, win or lose, whoever your guy was, if it was Usman, if it was Colby, that was just nice to see.
It was. I always like that with the UFC. And I was talking to you about this on the phone the other night. Like, I'm more of a fan of the martial art. Like, the characters and everything are funny. It's funny to see, like, when you got Conor doing his thing and shit like that. Obviously, you got Kobe doing his thing. Masvidal, doing their back and forth and everything. Mm-hmm. But I like the art, the actual, like, I'm into martial arts. So
we like the shit talking though, man. That's what gets us to watch, man.
But if they didn't have it, I would be fine.
I wouldn't watch two dudes do capoeira for 3 hours, but I would watch two guys that fucking hype the fight up and beat the shit out of each other for 5 minutes or for 15, sometimes 25 minutes. But I hear what you're saying. I hear what you're saying. The sport itself is nice. It's just nice to have the shit talking and the characters and the storylines behind it on top of the already exciting sport. That's why it's
like I said, like we said, UFC is kind of the sport right now. And that was, the fights, like I said, especially if the cards keep, I know the cards aren't going to be like the card we just had, but it didn't have a Conor on there. It didn't have, it had Usman and Colby, but it didn't really have, I feel like the casual fan didn't know who most of the people were.
What?
I'm talking about like me, fans like me. Niggas like me.
Well, I mean, there's like the casual fans that like know the rosters and like they know the big name fighters, somewhat big name fighters. And you got people that just like watch it here and there that are like a step below the casual fan. But if you're at all connected to the UFC world, like, what's going on right now. The fight.
I didn't know about Rose and Whaley. I didn't know the previous fights and shit. All I knew was Usman and Kobe.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm like, I guess a step above, somewhat of a, I don't know.
Like that fight was the deal breaker for me. It was like, all right, it's Kobe and Usman. I'll watch that instead of Canelo and Homeboy and Caleb Plant. So he knocked him the fuck out. He knocked him the fuck out.
Canelo,
bro. He knocked him the
11th round too. I mean, that dude lasted till the 11th round.
Yeah, but the way
Caleb Plant's not no fucking scrub. And I think Canelo actually won a belt off of Plant. Like, they were fighting for a title that Plant had, I believe. He took a belt from him, and obviously, there's like 87 belts for each fucking weight in boxing. Like,
See, that's what's weird to me,
there's
so.
like a 156-pound belt, then a 157-pound belt. Like, it's not like the UFC where you have like welterweight belt and that's it.
That's what I'm saying. I wish they would like streamline it like that, because it's like trying to keep up with all the belts and shit. It is weird to me.
The UFC is like, I hope they don't start to do that, but the BMF belt with Jorge Masvidal and Nate Diaz when they fought for the first time, their only time, they created a new belt. It was the bad motherfucker belt, the BMF belt.
That's fucking dumb.
And Jorge has it still. He hasn't defended it because it's not a real belt. It was kind of a novelty thing, but like, I hope they keep it like that, not adding a bunch of belts, because it takes away the luster of like a championship fight if there's 87 fucking belts.
Yeah, that's weird.
Bitch, I burn sage. You call me Luke Cage. Turn up like a page. Hit the stage. I just won't get paid. I'm gon' make a name. Want the fame. I'm gon' stack my change. Touch it, you get changed. You a stain. Wipe you a stain. When Dex my Nina name. Bitch, I burn sage. You call me Luke Cage. Turn up like a page. Hit the stage. I just won't get paid. I'm gon' make a name.